Good afternoon, everyone. So the topic I will discuss for today, it's all about the Republic Act number 8371 or the Indigenous Peoples Right Act 1997. Brief history backgrounds. One of every 6 Filipino is a member of an indigenous cultural community. 12 million Filipinos are members of the estimated 110 indigenous cultural communities or 17% of the estimated 70 million Filipinos. The indigenous people are among the poorest sector of Philippine society and also among the most powerless. The Indigenous People Right Act or EPRA was enacted on October 29, 1997 and took effect on November 22, 1997, precisely to address the marginalization and powerlessness of the indigenous cultural communities or ICCS. What is the Indigenous People Right Act or EPRA? First, recognize, protect, and promote the rights of ICCS or IPS. And the second, creates the National Commission of Indigenous Peoples. And third, establishes implementing mechanism. And the fourth, appropriates funds and other purposes. Next, what is the National Commission of Indigenous People or NCIP? The agency of national government of the Philippines that is responsible for protecting the rights of the indigenous people of the Philippines. And the second, shall protect and promote the interest, well-being of the ICCS or IPS with due regard to their beliefs, customs, and institutions. Indigenous cultural communities or indigenous peoples are homogeneous societies continuously live as organized community, bounded and defined territory. And the third, occupied, possessed, and utilize such territories since time immemorial under claims of ownership. And they sharing common bands of language, customs, traditions, and other distinct cultural traits or who have become. And they historically differentiated from the majority of the Filipinos. And the next, ICCS or IPS. There are at least 100 ethno-linguistic groups comprising the ICCS-IPS with a population of about 14 million based on extrapolation of Philippine population growth. Next, what are the rights of ICCS or IPS? First, the right to ancestral domains and lands. Second, rights to self-governance and empowerment. Third, right to social justice and human rights. And the fourth, rights to cultural integrity. Ancestral domains lands or they have native title or ancestral domains. Native title refers to pre-conquest rights to land and domain which as far back as memory reaches have been held under a claim of private ownership by ICCS or IPS have never been public lands. And while ancestral domains, all areas generally belonging to ICCS or IPS comprising lands, inland waters, coastal areas, and natural resources, and by themselves or through their ancestors, communally or individually, since time immemorial, continuously to the present except when interrupted by war or force or displacement by force, said still or as a consequence of government projects. Next, concept of ancestral lands domains shall include such concept of territories which cover not only the physical environment but the total environment including the spiritual, cultural bands to the areas which the ICCS or IPS possess, occupy and use, and to which they have claims of ownership. Next, indigenous concept of ownership sustains the view that ancestral domains and all resources found therein shall serve as the material basis of their cultural integrity. Or the indigenous concept of ownership generally holds that ancestral domains are the ICCS or IPS private, but community property which belongs to all generations and therefore cannot be sold, disposed, or destroyed. And next, rights to ancestral domains. It's all about the rights of ownership and possession of ICCS, IPS to their ancestral domains shall be recognized and protected. Such rights shall include: first, right of ownership over land or the right to claim ownership over land, bodies of water, traditionally and actually occupied by ICCS or IPS, sacred places, traditionally hunting and fishing grounds, and all improvements made by them at any time within the domains. And next, right to develop lands and natural resources. First, right to develop, control, and use lands and territories traditionally occupied, owned, or used. And the second, to manage and conserve natural resources within the territories and uphold the responsibilities for future generations. And the third, to benefit and share the profits from allocation and utilization of natural resources found therein. And the fourth, the right to negotiate the terms and conditions for the exploration of natural resources and the areas for the purpose of ensuring ecological and environmental protection, and the conservation measures are pursuant to national and customary law. And next, the right to an informed and intelligent participation in the formulation and implementation of any project, government or private, that will affect or impact upon the ancestral domain, and to receive just and fair compensation for any damages which they may sustain as a result of the project. And the right to effective measures by the government to prevent any interference with the alienation and encroachment upon these rights.